Thank you. Okay. This talk is about depression, or the biggest, heaviest, most troubling mess I've been carting around since birth. I've tried carrying it, pulling it, pushing it, throwing it over a bridge, ignoring it, blaming it, running away from it, all to no avail. This talk is also about the intersection of my depression and my spiritual awakening. It's funny how once you embark on your spiritual journey, you might think that you've come so far and thank goodness I'm not like I used to be. Wow, am I ever so enlightened now? So much more aware, see things more clearly, blah, blah, blah. And then a few years pass and you look back and you think, thank goodness I'm not like that anymore. Wow, am I ever so enlightened now? Well, this is where I am right now, where my struggle with depression has brought me. And after a while, I'll look back on this time and I'll think, thank goodness I'm not like that anymore. But if I hadn't suffered so from depression, I wouldn't have discovered spirituality. And if I hadn't found spirituality, I wouldn't have befriended depression, darkness, and found the richness of life. I have no authority to advise anyone, no training except living in my own skin. 20 years of therapy, lots of reading and sitting. And my story is not a particularly sad one. I've not had to overcome terrific difficulties that, should anyone hear them, they would think, of course she was depressed. If anything, the opposite would be true. Almost all my pain came from inside my own mind, which fueled my depression that much more. How dare I waste time feeling sorry for myself? So many have it worse, much, much worse. This was one more brick to add to the pile of guilt I hauled around for even daring to be depressed. That said, I've been in a depressive state more than not. I've struggled and I've fought and I've tried to get better. I no longer try to fix this. I live with it. I'm not always down. Often I'm fun and silly and whimsical. Depression has led me to an authentic life, deep experiences, and big questions. It's helped me peel back the layers and discover my true self. Sandra Ingerman says in the book Darkness Before Dawn that my depression, quote, my depression keeps me from living on a superficial level. The darkness takes us into the depths of consciousness. And I relate to this, possibly because I know no other way than to go deep. This is the story of how depression led me to a spiritual life filled with peace and joy, creativity, and authenticity. I can't share one story without the other. They're intertwined. I'm telling this story because it might help someone who hears it, someone who is in the dark night of the soul, someone who barely has the energy to keep trying, someone who feels guilty for daring to be depressed when you have so much to feel thankful for. My story is like many others: failed relationships, jobs that never quite made me happy, moving all over the country in the hopes of finding that place that would finally give me peace. Like the alchemist, I ended up back here in my hometown after years of searching. I lived in Michigan and Boston and New York, Seattle and DC. But when I landed back here in Louisville, I found everything I was looking for. I really missed everything I had given up in my searches, and I found an appreciation for what was always inside of me. Over these years, I would say that I had built a toolbox for depression. My toolbox is filled with awareness, meditation, therapy, journaling, yoga, qigong, diet, and friends that can be present for me. I lean on different tools at different times, but knowing I have so many gives me strength. Now I realize this toolbox is simply the ingredients for a healthy life, not to get rid of depression. My spiritual studies help me accept depression, to sit with it, to be curious about it. to ask it questions. Once I asked it, "Why are you here?" And it responded, "To protect you." From this, I learned that I was ready to face whatever emotion was lying beneath, whatever my blanket of depression was protecting me from. When this happens, as it did a few months ago, I asked myself in a journal, what is it I'm afraid to feel beneath this depression? I was able to identify it, to feel it and accept it as not being a threat. I didn't need to shut down. Perhaps when I was a child, I needed protection from these intense and dark emotions, but now I have the wisdom to work through them. Perhaps it had become a habit to automatically protect myself from whatever was below. Again, from Darkness Before Dawn, Robert Masters says, quote, "What our depression is protecting us from is precisely what we will need to face sooner or later. It's not something to be drugged, smothered, ignored, abstracted, or thrown into a dungeon, but something to unguardedly feel." Depression has become a signal that something in my life needs some attention, some work, some change, or perhaps just some acceptance. Carla McLaren, Darkness Before Dawn again, says that, quote, "Depression arises to tell you when things have gone awry, and it stops you from moving forward. Depression derails you, and its job is to slow you down or even stop you so you can attend to it. I don't have to live in fear of the darkness that I know will return. In fact, I can use it to have compassion for others. I can use it to spot those who need my presence and not my help. I can sit with someone without feeling their burden. I can accept darkness without trying to fix it. This is my gift. I've been fortunate to experience this non-judgment from a few special people. There have been those in my life who I could actually express even the suicidal feelings to. You can't tell your therapist, she'll have to report you. You can't tell most people. They will treat you like a paper doll and make you uncomfortable just for showing your true self. My former neighbor was one of these rare gifts. He and I shared the deep darkness, sometimes not leaving our homes for weeks on end. One time we were outside chatting and I spotted some turkey vultures circling overhead. And I remarked, "Well, one of us is on the way out." And he replied, "I should be so lucky." To be able to be frank about this is rare. Most well-intentioned people, they want to cheer you up, tell you what you have going for you. Or worse, they feel so uncomfortable with your darkness that they can't get away quickly enough. For them, depressed people are a burden. I have been a burden. These are not the ones I lean on anymore. It's not fair to them or to me. This is the awareness in my toolbox, knowing where to get support. I discovered spirituality when I reached a point of wondering whether I even had emotions anymore. I was mid-40s, my relationship at the time wasn't right, my job wasn't right, and there was always something just out of reach, something that would bring happiness if I could just get there. I'd like to share 3 of the pivotal moments on my spiritual journey. The first moment was when the door of the spiritual journey was opened for me. It was 2016. I was at a staff meeting at work. I was a lifelong atheist working as a bookkeeper at a progressive Baptist church. It's probably not an accident. My pastor coworker started this meeting with a short meditation. I'd meditated before and I dabbled in Buddhism and Taoism, and I'd met people in my life who were present and on the middle way, but I had never jumped into that lake. I'd spent maybe 30 years as an atheist, and proudly so. So here we are meditating at staff meeting, and seconds after I closed my eyes, I could not stop crying. There was so much inside of me that desperately wanted out. What a gift this was. What a clear message. Immediately following the meeting, I signed up for my first meditation class at the advice of the same coworker. I knew I had to find a way to deal with these emotions and not in the middle of a staff meeting. A beginning meditation class was starting at the Drepung Gomang Center for Engaging Compassion. The leader of the class was a Dr. Pete, a surgeon who gave up medicine to become a spiritual teacher. He was such a good teacher that he set me on a path that I couldn't ignore. I felt a door had been opened and I had walked through. There was no going back. Dr. Pete gently guided the class into the silence. Together, we dealt with physical aches and pains of just sitting, the irritability coming to the surface, our changing sleep patterns, and of course for me, tears, lots of them. I cried every time I meditated for at least the first few months. I finished that class and I took another, but I still needed more. So I asked Dr. Pete, where do I go now? I'm just hanging out here in this other world that I had always suspected existed, but I'm just floating around and I'm freaking out most of the time. I can't go back the other way. So I signed up for some intensive one-on-one work with Dr. P. Over the months, we went deep into past trauma and we searched for the root belief that I held, that one that everyone develops to get through childhood, but that now needs to be put to rest. I kicked and I cried and I resisted and I gave in and then I resisted again. I challenged everything and especially Dr. Pete. I tried to quit the program halfway through, blaming him for everything. Point is, I discovered my childhood belief, my wound that needed to be healed is that I'm not even supposed to be here. My mom didn't tell my dad until way into her pregnancy she was expecting for fear of his reaction. They had 6 kids already and not much money, and the stress of another on the way terrified Mom. There was a lot of difficulty with my birth, and Mom almost lost her life because of it. So all through my childhood, I'd heard the story of Mom almost dying because I was born, often from a sister who had her own wounds to heal, and she took it out on me. So with the help of my new teacher, I took it upon myself to research what had really happened, not the story I'd believed my whole life. So I spoke to my older siblings because they were old enough to remember how it was. Turned out I was right. It was a difficult time, lots of fighting, fear of death. So then I decided to take myself on a guided meditation back to that moment when I came home from the hospital as a baby. I watched as an observer everything that happened. I saw that no one was angry as I had thought. They were scared, terrified even. Poor dad was stressed out of his mind with all these kids to care for and a wife who might not even make it. My siblings were confused about why a baby showed up and then was whisked away to be cared for by family friends. And there was fighting about that too, who should take me and where I should go. And then Mom was taken back to the hospital, hemorrhaging and weak. Oh, and the family dog died that day. So when I observed this scene, I realized they were scared. They loved me already. Lots of babies aren't easy. And that sometimes things just happen. I was able to confront the belief I'm not supposed to be here and turn it into, I'm supposed to be here because I am here. I must add that I truly had the best mom and dad in the world. Mom just felt so guilty for not wanting another baby and trying to be at peace with her Catholic beliefs. My second big moment led me to Joe Zarantinello. A stressful interaction at that same church job led me to take a walk to clear my head and calm down. My intention was to circle the block, but my feet led me to Carmichael's bookstore. It was truly like I was on autopilot. I went directly to the spirituality section and I placed my hand on a book. I looked at it and then I laughed and I wandered around the store. Twice, I went back and looked at that same book. I had already started my spiritual studies at this point, and I had a small book collection with Eckhart Tolle and John Kabat-Zinn, but I had no idea what this book was about. The book was Becoming Bodhisattvas by Pema Chodron. I didn't know what a bodhisattva was, much less a Pema Chodron. When I took the book to the register, the man working there complimented my purchase. I told him I had no idea what I was buying, and I thanked him for the encouragement. He offered that if I enjoyed the book, to come back and talk to him. A week later, there I was, standing in line to tell him it was the most important book I'd read so far. So I left Carmichael's that day with the armful of new books and a scrap of paper with the words Loose Leaf Hollow written in pencil. The experiences I had at Loose Leaf Hollow, along with the teaching and direction and friendship, included my first time feeling joy and discovering that I'm not an atheist. I'm a mystic. I remember sitting on a chilly patio talking to Joe in between sessions. I told him I pictured two paths before me, like a choice to be made while moving through a wooded area. One was dark and ominous and cold. The other was like a Disney scene, birds chirping and sunlight filtering through the trees. This was my choice between atheism and mysticism. I thought these two were opposites, but they were much closer than I'd realized. Okay, now third moment. This happened the night of my 50th birthday. Anyone who suffers from depression knows the energy it requires just to get through the day, the weight always pulling me back. For decades, I'd had this thought in my head that I wouldn't make it past the age of 50. I would simply run out of energy to keep trying. No terrible tragedy would happen. I'd just run out of fight. So here I am with my 50th approaching, and I'd done so much spiritual work, but that nagging thought was still there, and depression still sometimes knocked me off my feet. So I went to sleep on the eve of my birthday, and I dreamt that I died. I was two people in the dream, so I witnessed the death, and I was afraid to tell my family in the dream because I knew I had been responsible for that other me in the dream and that I had neglected her. The next morning, still in the dream, I discovered that that other me wasn't actually dead. She'd come back. I felt so guilty for leaving her alone all night, but she was okay. She was dehydrated and weak, but she rose from her bed and she walked down a garden path off into the distance, never to return. The me that remained was reborn, I suppose, free of the other me who was now finally happy and had moved on peacefully. I remember many of my dreams. I believe it's one of my powers. This dream took me some time to digest. I chose to believe that what I had feared but also kind of wanted my whole life had come true. I didn't live past 50. That me died and a new me stepped in. Maybe the real me. I had a chance to live the life I wanted, having put that part of myself to rest. Where I am now is a rich and wonderful place. It's not depression-free, but I accept it. I feel wiser after each episode. I'm also able to work through my emotions much more effectively. I treat myself gently, and I take the time when I know I need it. I don't explain myself. I try not to waste time feeling shame or guilt. I slid back into depression recently. I felt it coming as a reaction to a heartbreak. To me, depression means I'm almost unable to move. It pains me to move my body, even though exercise really helps. Sometimes it hurts to feel better. It's more comfortable to stay in pain. So I allowed myself some time to sit with it, to rest, to sleep, to protect my delicate soul. I reminded myself I was depressed, which helps me stop the cycle. It's funny how sometimes it takes me a minute to even realize, hey, I'm depressed. I asked myself what was beneath this depression. What was I protecting myself from? I wrote down everything I was feeling, the best and the worst things that could possibly happen, what I was learning, and how proud I was of me for recognizing it. Sometimes when I'm really stuck and I don't know how to access what I'm feeling through journaling, I'll write down this sentence. How am I feeling right now? And then I'll answer, I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm a mess. You get the idea. But this gets me started, gets the pen moving. Sometimes I'll be able to keep writing and find some answers. Where I am now is also richer because of authentic living. This requires courage, which I'm happy to say I have. I've discovered I'm a highly sensitive person, or HSP. And that means I process information differently. They say 20% of the population can call themselves HSP. I'm not big on labels, but this one really helped me to accept myself. Here's a blurb I found at Psychology Today about HSPs. If you're a highly sensitive person, you have a heightened awareness of the stimuli around you, which can be good or bad. HSPs tend to be bothered by violence and can easily be overwhelmed, which leads them to avoid certain situations. Highly sensitive people can also be very creative, have a deep level of empathy. They report that they form deep bonds with others, have exciting dreams and internal monologues, and find great enjoyment in art, music, and human connection. So I no longer feel like something is wrong with me because I don't fit in. I don't really want to fit in. Maybe thinking that fitting in was the goal was enough to make me depressed because I knew I'd never get there. I love not fitting in, and I love others who don't. Trying to be something you're not is a sure way to stay depressed. So thanks to Dr. P and Joe Z, discovering that I'm a mystic, I choose to see meanings in my dreams and synchronicities in daily life and magic everywhere I look. If I hadn't struggled so much to go so deep inside, I wouldn't have found all this magic. I wouldn't have become an artist. I wouldn't have identified all my purposes in life. Someone said recently, right here in Heart to Heart, that life leads you to the path meant for you. I finally listened. Joe, could you put up the screensaver? Hmm. Here's a picture from my neighborhood. So every morning I pass through this road closed barrier on my walk with my dog. So I practice walking through this space that seems to be closed. And when someone's depressed, it feels like the way is shut. The road is closed, but there's a space in between, or around, or under. Like Jill says, it's where the light gets in. And that's that space you find to slowly make room for more space, and more space after that. Each morning, I leave behind whatever I need to as I pass through these gates. I remember that the road is not closed, no matter how much depression makes it seem that way. I pay no attention to that steamroller right there. I step around it and I find my own path. Yesterday, after 9 months of construction on my street, it came to an end. They took the signs down. But I've practiced this entrance so many times, reminding myself that the road is never closed. It has become a habit. Okay, Joe, you can take that down. I'd like to say thank you, beautiful souls, for listening to me today. I'll include my contact info in the notes for anyone who needs it. I'll also share a bibliography of books that have really helped me over the years. And I'll close by saying that you can get to the other side of the mountain, so don't give up.